The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting groups. If you'd like to produce a show, call us at 260-421-1250.
Let me be your lighthouse so I can show you the way. Let me be your shining light, I'll keep you from drifting away. I'm the one that makes you try.
Hello, it's Patty Hunter of Patty's Page. Welcome to my show. We are now doing another show this Saturday and Sunday. Yes, we are here. To my left is John Dickmeyer, who is my co-host. Hello, John.
Patty.
Oh, anyways, and to his left is Bob Jones.
Hey, Patty. Thank you for inviting me today, and good morning or good afternoon, Fort Wayne.
Good
or
morning,
good evening.
good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Whenever.
Whenever.
Bob Jones, you are the VP Board of Directors of the Old Fort,
Yes.
where history comes to life. Where is this place here?
Oh, the Old Fort Complex of Buildings is on Spy Run. The physical address is 1201 Spy Run Avenue.
Yeah.
So you can find us with, maps or GPS or a navigator. We have a P.O. box as our mailing address.
Oh, yeah.
We're on the west side of Spy Run, immediately as you cross the St. Mary's River.
It's a big place. I've seen it. So where were you born and raised?
Oh, I grew up in Gary, Indiana.
Ah,
I was born in the first half of the last century.
me too.
Yeah, and I had a wonderful childhood and enjoyed that. Lived in the southern part of Lake County for a while, lived in Chicago for a while. While living in Chicago, I met a Fort Wayne girl, and the rest, as they say, is history.
History. Hey, listen, we're both, all of us have lived 2 centuries.
Combined, we can start adding up. Somebody got do the math.
You mean in 2 centuries?
In 2 centuries, yes. Anyways,
Thanks.
while growing up, who influenced you the most?
Oh, well, I had a wonderful schooling.
Yeah.
I had teachers I respected. My mother, Jenny Jones, hi Mom, who lives here in Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
She's 92 years
Wow.
young.
Oh.
And my dad is a Marine. He's now deceased, and I miss him terribly. But I remember being so totally amazed by all the things he did around the house. You know, where did you learn that? How did you know how to do that? And I think that helped me be willing to try things I had never had training to do. But
Did you ever go into the Marines or?
No, I did not serve in the
Military.
military.
No. You went to college or university or?
I finished at Indiana Purdue at Fort Wayne, an education degree and master's, and taught in East Allen County schools
You taught?
for 37 years.
Aye.
Kindergarten through 6th grade, the elementary grades.
Isn't it nice to mold them?
I had wonderful experiences,
Yes.
and you see that. Especially the hardest job I've ever had was being a kindergarten teacher.
Ah.
And to all the kindergarten teachers watching, I bowed down to you because it's
Hectic.
in many ways you think it's a thankless job, but it is so rewarding. And the coolest thing was this 2 years later, I had some of those same students in 2nd grade, and it just was a wonderful year to have seen how much they grew
Yes.
and just kind of hit the ground
Mature
running, and it was
as
wonderful.
they mature and as they grew up. Oh.
And it's wonderful to have males in those lower grades because so many times you only have females teaching kindergarten or teaching 2nd grade. And I think it's nice to have, a mixture of people that the kids get to see. Like to see more women in upper grades too, and that's great. But education is wonderful. It's a place where you can learn a lot.
Yes.
And I know that that's a big part of what you do over at the fort is teach.
Yes.
History. You teach history?
I do.
Just Fort Wayne or United States? Or?
Well, in elementary, of course, you're teaching all of the subjects. The old fort is kind of where that teacher gene is fed. And our mission, of course, is two-pronged. It's educational, to make available and to make known information about the early development of the Northwest Territory and this region along the three rivers that we know as the St. Mary's, the St. Joseph, and the Maumee, where Fort Wayne started. The other part of our mission is preservation,
Yes.
but not only of the timbers and the buildings and the structures and the grounds and the gardens, but the preservation of the stories, the
Storytelling.
lives of the people who came to this area, the lives of the people who grew up in the area. And it's the local history is really fascinating, but those stories often seem to fade away. And I love reviving them and telling students, we had a Romeo and Juliet. You think William Shakespeare has a corner on these story themes?
Yeah.
We had a Romeo and Juliet. We have a sort of a Joan of Arc-ish story about a young warrior woman.
Yeah. Oh,
We have a princess that Hollywood hasn't discovered yet. I think we need to do something about that.
who's that?
Who is that? Well, I can't pronounce her name properly in Miami. I've seen it spelled something like Manwangapath.
Wang.
That is painted on our new riverboat, Sweet Breeze. Little Turtle's daughter. Misha Kaniqua, Little Turtle, his
Kaniqua.
daughter.
Yes.
Yes, I'll stop there.
So what did
Oh, you shouldn't stop because it's a
also
wonderful story.
interconnected. It is a wonderful story.
So when you went to college, or which one? College, university, which one?
I studied for years
I
in
think
Chicago and
You
then
already
at
said
Indiana
that, yeah.
University here in Fort
Okay,
Wayne.
my mind just went.
So where in Chicago?
I studied at Moody Bible Institute for many years, but I didn't finish the program there.
Well, I'm not moody, but
No, wonderful school. lot of-
Yes,
a
it
lot of
provided
people don't-
a good foundation. I
Good
learned to do
foundation.
research,
A lot of
and it
people
was fascinating.
don't know about Moody Bible Institute, but very, very important in the history of Chicago, too.
Very historic.
so when you first became interested in history, especially about this area here, at what age were you?
Oh, well, do you remember travel before the days of the interstates? And I had family in Michigan. We'd go up there, take Route 12 and Route 20 and all the back roads. We drove all the way to Arizona, partly on the Route 66.
Route 66.
And, the back roads of Texas to get to Arizona. It was quite fascinating. And along the way, there'd be a little grove of trees, a picnic table, a hand pump to get out and pump the water, and often a big iron plaque
Right.
that pointed out some
Spot.
local history.
Yeah.
Why is this area special to the people who live around there? A historic tavern, a historic mill, an incident of some kind. And my mother especially would always say to my dad, "Bob, stop the car," because we'd get out and read those even if we weren't ready
Yes.
for a break. And
Sure.
so I think that's where I first got the sense that there's a wider world out there.
Yes.
I mean, we have books to read and history books, but the fact that these things actually happened in places that I could pass through and learn about. And I have a visual photographic memory of the day in 4th grade when we took out our Indiana history workbooks
Right.
and turned to the map section and we talked about Fort Wayne, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, they actually have a fort? Because my friends and I would go out into the dunes and into the woods and we would build forts. We would excavate in the sand and drag over logs and cattails, and we all building forts and tree forts. And I thought, oh my goodness, this place in Indiana actually has a fort. And that was the very first time I ever heard of Fort Wayne, and little did I realize I would land there one day.
So when did you become vice president?
I don't remember the exact year. 2006 was my very first time as a participant at the Old Fort. In its earlier years, I became a life member of the Fort Wayne and Allen County Historical Society, and we attended many events when the fort was in its earlier days and open to the public every day. But in 2006, after what I call the reboot of historic Fort Wayne, which happened in 2004,
Right.
but my son, who was in college at the time, was interested in living history with some college friends of his. And they said, hey, Dad, we just need some warm bodies. Somebody will provide the clothing. You get to carry and fire a flintlock musket.
Wow.
And I had never done anything like that. I'm not a hunter or a sportsman, so that was kind of the hook that got my attention. And after that time, I just became immersed in living history, finding the patterns, pick up the needle and thread, make my own historic clothing. And
What you made, is that over there?
I'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Okay. So you asked about being on the board.
Yes.
Well, my first event, about a year later, I noticed points on the buildings that needed attention.
Right.
It was evident.
Right.
And I thought, oh my goodness, we're having fun here at this event, but somebody behind the scenes has to do a lot of work to make it possible for us to have fun.
Yes.
So I investigated that. I found the website. I found how to get involved, the volunteer sign up, and within a very short time, I got a phone call, a little volunteer orientation, attended some work days, helped put a roof on on the blacksmith shop, helped with clearing the riverbank of debris, and doing a number of group projects. Then asked to write some lesson plans to go along with
Yes.
connecting with teachers and students at the fort. And eventually I was invited, I don't remember what year, to be on the board, and then later became an officer on the board.
You betcha.
Oh, you bet. Awesome.
I was going to say, the old fort, it's not the original.
No, this Fort Wayne's historic old fort is a reconstruction, highly accurate. I'm convinced if we could bring those soldiers back, they'd feel it right at home. They'd go right to their bunks. They'd know where, what was happening.
So you had
Yes.
pictures or something like that?
Yes, I wasn't involved, of course. The planning began in the 1950s. A bicentennial project. How is Fort Wayne going to say happy birthday to the United States of America in 1976? And many communities were planning bicentennial special projects, special parks, space needles, commemorative plaques and such. And someone, I wish I knew the name of the person, maybe someone watching the program was involved in those days and would give us a call and tell me who that was. But there had to be one person who said, after all these ideas were presented through the brainstorming, you know what we need to do? We're Fort Wayne, we need to build a fort. And 20 years of planning and fundraising culminated in with Brian Dunnigan as the director. The construction began in 1974, and it opened to the public in the summer of 1976.
So we have pictures. Do we?
We have pictures not related to that specifically, but we'll
Of
get
the
to
old
those in
fort?
just a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so your role as a teacher.
Wow. Well, that's where we could call this program The 500 Hats of Bartholomew. It's a Dr. Seuss book, but the many hats that I wear as an educator. My first role was education liaison. So when teachers want to plan an event, and I have like 4 or 5 school visits coming up in the next few months. I plan that and work with teachers. What can they expect to do? And then I contact volunteers. Otherwise, I'd be there all by myself. Because we don't have like a daily staff.
It's
But
nonprofit?
volunteers, pardon me?
Nonprofit?
We're a nonprofit, yes.
And
All volunteers.
what's coming up in November, December?
December is the 1 month when we have no scheduled public activities.
No Christmas or anything?
But we have Christmas at the fort, that's correct, which this year is Joyeux Noël, a French Christmas.
I'm going.
I just became fascinated with the early French culture, Nouvelle France.
Right.
And the French were the first Europeans to explore into this area as early as the late 1600s. I know La Salle came, if he didn't come right up the St. Mary's River, he was near here because he wrote about the portage or the carrying place not far from here, near what is today Waynedale, being superior to the portage near the Kankakee or just off of Lake Michigan.
Right.
And there were several places because goods from Europe and what is today Canada coming across the Great Lakes goes across land a short distance back into the waters, the headwaters of the Wabash and tributaries of the Wabash
Right.
to the Ohio, the Mississippi, and then either up to St. Louis or down to New Orleans and the Caribbean and the rest of the world. So this was strategically very interesting to the French. And so the traders, both licensed and black market traders called the Coeur de Bois, came into the area with a vigorous trade with the many indigenous people, the native tribes that lived in the area.
Yeah. My husband, like I said, is Mohawk. He was with the Loyalists. They were pushed out from the Americans, and they live now, his family live in Ontario. But I'm sure there's still some relatives in New York. That's where,
Yeah.
in New York, yeah,
That's where the Iroquois group were from.
Mohawk.
And the Mohawks were a part of that confederacy.
So,
So Christmas at the fort, Joyeux Noël. I love celebrating that French culture. If I asked you, what are you going to have for Thanksgiving? I don't think we'd be very surprised. Turkey dressing. There's just a few things that it's just very familiar.
Yeah.
Unless you have some reason not to have the turkey and the dressing and the mashed potatoes. Pumpkin pie.
of course,
And the French also had a collection of some very specific dishes. So I just think it is very fun to present that and say, who'd have thought? It's
Yeah,
it's
it's good. I
fascinating.
love the food.
I can sing one French Christmas carol.
Oh, yeah.
I have friends who speak fluent French, and we have a Jesuit priest who speaks
really?
French, a reenactor priest
Right.
who will be there,
Right.
Père Noël, Father Christmas, as the French knew him. Sometimes had a sidekick, depending on which part of France. But instead of stockings hanging by a fireplace, the French children, boys and girls, left their sabots or their wooden shoes by the door. And then if they had been good
That sounds
throughout the
Dutch.
year, Father Christmas would leave treats
Father
in their
Christmas.
shoes.
that sounds almost
Outside.
British-like.
Yeah,
Father Christmas.
yes.
That's British. Really.
That's very northern European.
Okay.
The Dutch would do something similar
Yeah.
with wooden shoes.
Yeah, the wooden. Yeah, you either get coal or fruit, or whatever. If you're a bad boy or girl, you get coal. If you're good, you have fruit like oranges or apples or something.
Yeah,
Something.
nuts.
Nuts.
Yeah.
So we have. Let's go to these pictures.
Okay.
we have to-
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Let's start showing them.
One of my a real pleasure is to, of course, I get lots of history and doing the planning at Historic Fort Wayne, but I love getting out to other sites to be a part of the way they present history. And
that you in there?
years ago, I am there in a Virginia officer's uniform.
Gold.
I presented as His Excellency General George Washington.
Ah.
And I was involved in an event at Detroit's historic Fort Wayne, which is a long story to explain that. But in December, they have an event, a colonial event, and you go from house to house for various, the public goes from house to house and camp to camp for various experiences.
Treats.
And my area was meeting with my officers at Valley Forge. So we had just 10 minutes, a small group, and a little tableau unfolded as if they were welcome to the camp at Valley Forge, and I'm sorry we have no food to offer you. We were down to, all the meat was gone, and we're down to 25 barrels of flour, and we're waiting on Congress to appropriate the supplies that the men desperately need. And many men were anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going into the little
Let's go to the
little
next
play.
picture. What
Yes.
else do we have here? Oh, can you,
Okay.
that you?
Yes, one of my personas at Historic Fort Wayne is to portray one of the soldiers, and we'll talk about the uniform in a moment. But there weren't too many 70-year-old privates in the 1st Infantry, so I've been gravitating more toward a civilian presentation.
You're a baker?
Partnering with the Boy Scouts of America, we built a wood-fired bake oven. So in the case of this this picture, I'm the French baker, and that's one of the hats I wear. The toque, which is over here on the table, the chapeau canadien, the red stocking cap.
Oui.
Yeah, there it is right there.
My dad was born in Montreal.
And I would add some trade silver just to, that's like my wallet up there. So.
Let's look at that we had. Can you go over
Oh,
there?
the rest of it? You want me to bring it over to the table, or,
Yeah.
or is he going to zoom in on that?
Zoom.
He could
About
zoom
zooming
in.
in on that.
Okay. The
Yeah.
the French
The
the
French.
French toque, one of the hats that I wear. It's the wool was hand spun. The woman knows the name of the sheep that wool came from, and our Apple Cart Creations knit the cap, and it's all stretched out, and then half of it is tucked inside. And then above that, whoops. Oh, okay, thank you. So the chapeau canadien, or the toque as we call it, with the trade silver, and of course this cross is the cross of Lorraine, which is clearly a symbol
oui.
recognizable to anyone Française.
My dad was born in Montreal, so he got Quebecer.
Another hat I wear. This is
Oh,
Revolutionary War era.
that's cute.
And this is General Wayne's hat. I had a private's hat. I had to get a
cool.
new hat. I had a general's coat. I had to have a general's hat. So this is a new hat. The familiar tricorn. It's the common round hat, fur felt, and then the style of military hat was called the cocked hat, and ribbons have tied the sides, and the cockade is kind of a military arrangement. The black ribbon being North America,
Oui.
the white being we're allied with the French. So at the Rochambeau, the Marquis de Lafayette,
Oui.
and others that aided, without whom's help there would be no America today. It would be. I'm convinced we'd be more like Australia and Canada. We'd be
What's
perhaps still
wrong
apart.
with
Nothing
Canada?
wrong with that.
What's wrong with Canada?
It's kind of like the books, create your own ending,
Oh, boy.
and you've got to pick an ending. Okay, so we know how our story has unfolded, but it's fascinating to examine turning points in history and wonder what it might have been like had the outcome been different. So the other hat is
that fit you?
this leather bucket. I don't know that this one really fits me, but it's the purpose. If I stood up, you'd see it makes me look a lot taller. And so
Yeah.
also early in the history of the United States, we had Europe envy. We didn't want to be thought of as farmers and country bumpkins. We wanted to be respected by all. We were now a new nation. We wanted to be respected by all the nations of the world. So this is a European style
That's what I
that was
thought. adopted.
I don't know the exact year,
Looks Russian.
but around
German.
around the beginning of the 19th century. So soldiers under the command of Captain James Ray at the fort in 1812, during the War of 1812, wore shakos similar to this.
And
Is that German?
if you look at the hats that were worn at this period, Patty, you're right. The Prussians and other German state armies wore something like this.
Yeah, my mother was Prussian. So there you go.
And here,
Yes.
here on the table, if you get a picture of that, that's the 1810 pattern coat. So these are the coats that the men wore.
Does that fit
here.
you?
Shows very well. Oh, that he's got a still picture.
What?
Of that.
What? Who makes those costumes again?
Oh, this one. These are custom made, and there's a number of different sources that we draw on when we need
Who
more
makes
supplies.
the tails?
The coats?
Yeah.
I don't know the manufacturer. Again, there are a number of manufacturers where you can have them made,
Dude.
custom made,
Yeah.
or coming. Oh no, that's what we will have passed that. So yeah, 1812 is a very fascinating time of history
Oh,
to
yeah.
be a reenactor.
So, how many people would normally go to the old fort? Basically,
Living at the fort.
Well, not,
when it
people
was-
live there. No, I'm talking about now.
Oh,
Visiting.
Visiting.
Well, we have events, and it might be a good time to highlight that. Well, it's gone. The last weekend of January, when a lot of places are state parks might still be closed, the old fort will be open on the last Saturday of January.
Right.
And we have a 60, 70, or 80 reenactors that all portray. This year it'll be 1760 at the end of the French and Indian War. And they're a wonderful group, very exciting, a one-day event. Then in mid-February, we have an event that is Revolutionary War. So our Facebook page and our website will have those exact dates. We have something every month from January through November. March and April we also have, we call them Garrison Weekends, so they're smaller, compact events. And weather permitting, we get hundreds of people come by for the day.
How many people would it hold if when they had lived in
When
the
the fort was garrisoned, the years 1813, 14, 15, in that era, I've seen the actual records. And what amazes me is that it varies from month to month, and I don't know how to attribute that, but it varied from 40 or 50 privates, corporals, and sergeants.
They're just passing through, you mean?
Well, I'm not sure what it accounts for the difference in the numbers, up to in the 90s of just the enlisted men. So somewhere just under 100 or just over 100. During the War of 1812, at one point it was over 200.
Wow.
There were 100 militia from Ohio staying at the fort with the garrison. But that was for a short time.
So, they had hunters to go for the animals.
The soldiers were not allowed to hunt. They were allowed to fish
Oh,
recreationally, and there are records of that. But they've got soldiering duties to do. So there may have been accounts of hunters
Deer.
bringing supplies to the fort, but primarily they relied on
Fish.
the pork, salted pork, and salted beef that came military rations. I read one account that totally surprised me of beef on the hoof arriving at the fort. And there's just not a lot of detail. Where would they have kept all these cows? The commander wrote a letter complaining that the number of cows he was expecting did not arrive.
oh,
So there's a mystery there to deal with. So how were they processed? Totally unknown to me.
I
All
don't
those
wanna
details
know.
were left out. They're just little snippets
Yeah.
that you get from those primary sources. One of the most fascinating, if I can interject this here, I read through a digital collection a letter in which the commander was acknowledging, wow, 1 minute, acknowledging receipt of the supplies, and he ended that note with, and I want you to know I received the pencil I ordered. So
Show
here
us
on the
the
table,
pencil.
it might have been a pencil like this. The wooden pencils, this is an artist sketch pencil, but
Yes.
it might have been something very similar to this that had been made for hundreds of years. But since it was only one pencil, it might have been something like this.
yeah.
An artist's Conte pencil that has it's like a mechanical pencil, so a lead is internal to that,
Yeah.
and I can lock that in and write for years with one pencil.
Okay, this is almost the end, and I would like to thank you, John Dickmeyer.
Thank you,
and
Patty.
Bob Jones and John Dickmeyer.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
For coming on to my show. This is Patty Hunter. This was interesting, wasn't it? We should have him on again.
Yeah, and thank you, Fort Wayne, for watching.
So oldfortwayne.org, how to get in touch with Bob Jones. So thank you and God bless. So see you next week.
Godspeed, my love, until we meet again. You're always in my heart and every dream. Don't let this time apart give in to all our fears. God will keep us close from up above. So